Welcome to Virtualize Everything, where we strive to educate and inform the viewer about virtualization and virtualization technology. Today's video presentation is going to be about creating two separate web pages on the same Apache web server. We're hosting this Apache web server in an Ubuntu container that we set up in a previous video. If you don't know how to install Apache, or if you don't know how to create containers, I suggest going back and watching that video. But today, we're going to set up two separate web pages in the same server. Now, we're also going to have to build upon some of our DNS skills using Pi-hole to do this. You can also do this with your own DNS configurations if you're not using Pi-hole. Even some routers support the function of setting up your own private DNS entries. We're going to use Pi-hole today, and I may be able to help you with some, but I can't help you with many of them, as I don't know every independent router software thoroughly enough to help you without being in front of it. So go to the forums and figure out how to do that if you're not using Pi-hole. With that being said, this tutorial could help you if you were looking to host two separate web pages from the same IP address. So everybody is given one public IP address. Now businesses can pay for more public IP addresses depending on what they're doing, but they always have one. So if you want to host two separate web pages using the same public IP address, you may be thinking you can't do that. Well, you can. And that's what this tutorial is meant to show you. Instead of configuring your DNS in Pi-hole as we are for local, you would configure it for your hosting site like GoDaddy. Let's move on to our tutorial. We have our console here and running. Now we can begin by creating two separate folders. One we're going to call Site 1. The other we're going to call Site 2. We're also going to place a folder inside of both of them called HTML. To do that, we're going to start by using a command called mkdir. We're going to add -p after it so it creates both directories at once. Then we're going to enter the path of /var/www. Now, if you've watched my other installing Apache video, you'll know this is the beginning to the default file path for Apache's default page. Now we're going to create a folder called site1.local and add a /html here. That creates a folder and a subfolder at that file path. If I was to run an ls, you'll see the file right there. Now we can go ahead and run the same command, but call it site2. And if I run the same ls command, there's site2. Let's make some simple web pages so that we can see that our steps are working correctly. We're going to do that once again with nano. I used the command shown here where I entered the same file path, but I added a /index.html at the end. So entering that command, you see I've created the first web page. Now when we press Ctrl X, we're able to save it. So let's go ahead and create our second web page using the same process, but calling it site2 as we created the site2.local folder previously. And let's copy and paste in the second site. Now you can see when we save that, it works and we don't have to enter any extra information. So now if we were to use an ls command on the site2 folder, you can see we actually have an index.html saved. So now we actually need to configure Apache so it knows about the two web pages and it can begin distributing them. To do that, we're going to use this command here. cd/etc/apache2/sites-available. That takes us to a directory where now we need to actually create the configuration file for each site. We can do that by entering nano site1.conf. For this first configuration file, we're going to create a file that looks like so. Now, I would like to say, if you've already made it to this point and you're wondering or struggling trying to keep up with all these copy and pasted screens, they are available at virtualizeeverything.com. There will be a link to the exact posting in my blog with the steps for this video in the comments section below. So now we need to do the same process for our second site. So we're going to change it to site2.conf. And I just noticed I got a little copy and paste happy with the first configuration file. So we're going to have to go back. We need to change a few lines here. Server name right here is going to be Control X, site2 to save. We need to enter site2 here. We need to enter site2 here. And site2 here as well. And we actually need to delete this second part. So our file looks like that. Control X to save, Y, enter, and let's go edit one. We're going to enter site1 here. Now, let's tell Apache about each separate configuration file. To do that, we're going to type A2 ENSITE space site1.conf. And it's going to tell us that we need to reload Apache 2. We're definitely going to want to do that in a minute. But let's first tell Apache about Site2's configuration file. Now we can go ahead and run the reload command. Just copy it from right here and we'll paste it in and press enter. Now this is all set up, but if I was to come up here and enter the IP address of the server, you can see we're still not viewing Site1 or Site2. We're actually viewing Apache's default page. Well, that's because it actually looks at the incoming file request for the transfer and inspects it for the domain name in order to figure out which website it actually wants to serve up to you. So we need to head over to our Pi-hole, log in, and come down here to local DNS and DNS records. Now, I have a few pre-configured here, but let's go ahead and actually add a couple more. So to do that, we're going to call this site1.local, and we're going to give it the address of 10.10.2.195. And add it in. Now we can go ahead and go site2, and we're going to give it the same IP address and hit add. Now you can see the separate independent entries right here. Now, if we are to go to Site1, if it doesn't try to do some weird search, http://site1.local, you see Site1 appear. Now we should be able to do the same thing by going http:// site2 dot local, and there's site 2. So now you're able to host 2 separate independent websites on the same IP address. I hope you found tonight's video educational and also are able to put this skill to use in creating multiple web pages and hosting them from one IP address. If you're trying to host web pages at home using services like dynamic DNS, or if you're just wanting to minimize the amount of servers that are required for your project, skills like this are necessary. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help Virtualize Everything bring you more great content like this on setting up multiple web pages on the same server, and to help other people find Virtualize Everything. As always, have a good night.